I think if you are ready, I will let you start.
Sure.
Thank you
Well,
again.
let's do it. Absolutely. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm really excited that you're here. Thank you for making time. If you're watching the recording, good for you as well. We're going to start right now. The name of my presentation is Not Just Surviving, but Thriving in a Post-Lockdown for Creatives. What a fun topic, right? And before we even just dive into that idea, I think we all need to be able to be on the same page. So what that means is we're just going to try to frame up what we're going to be trying to do today, and the goal is to be in alignment with that. So number one, probably one of the most important things here is you have to believe what I'm going to tell you is possible, which that may be a little challenging, especially if you've lost contracts like I have, but that's super, super important. Number two, I'm actually going to dream for you. I know you're thinking like, Diego, I don't need you to do that for me, but I'm going to do it anyway. And what that just means is that I'm going to dream on your behalf. I'm going to dream that there's a possibility that you're going to listen to some of this stuff and it might make an impact on your life. So that's the impossible dream I'm going to dream on your behalf right now, this second. Okay, did it. All right, number three is that a lot of what we're going to be talking about has to do with effective storytelling about yourself. And so I'm going to be using a lot of different tools and different sort of tactics that are in and around storytelling. So if you're familiar with storytelling already, it's probably going to be very helpful for you as you listen on and think about what I'm saying and sharing with you. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start. But before we do, who am I? You're probably wondering yourself, like, who's this Diego Rodriguez character? I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. That way you can kind of understand what's going on, what I'm all about. So I'm a commercial director. I'm a filmmaker. I'm an actor. I'm a video editor. I'm not the best singer, but that does not stop me from singing at karaoke. And I love art and art history, chai tea. And now I'm going to get into how I got into this whole topic, this whole headspace. I'm going to go back in time to 2020. I know we're still in it, but this is pre-COVID where everything is going fine and dandy. I've got a particular life. Everything is pretty chill. And then suddenly COVID occurs. And in my world, I had a $40,000 contract that went away. And then I had a very other stable contract that I've been working for the last 4 years that also went away. So about $80,000 to $85,000 was gone. And I was a little panicked. Life was pretty cool before, and then I got flipped upside down. And I started to wonder, like, what's going to happen? Am I going to be able to survive? And not only was I able to survive, I started to thrive. And this is how I was able to do that. Here we go. Okay. So to talk about thriving, I think it's important to consider what that means exactly. And for me, it's not just about doing well, but improving over last year. And specifically, actually increasing your gross sales from what it was last year to what it will be next year. And it may sound really salesy, like I'm going to pitch you a multi-level marketing program. I'm not going to. I'm just letting you know that that's how I would define thriving. And that's really important to understand what that is, and that my goal is for this to be a possibility for you and everyone who's listening right now. We're going to roadmap this whole process. You understand what it is all about. The big idea here, that if you just had to distill this entire conversation into one idea, it would be, I'm going to help you identify your superpower and your specialty so that then you can become known for it. And that's how you're going to thrive. In order to get there, of course, we're going to have to figure out what that superpower is. We're going to have to identify your origin story, maybe talk a little bit about your strengths and weaknesses. We're going to identify what you stand for. And we're going to talk about telling the story that you're creating, you're crafting to the right people. You do all that, boom, you're thriving. Okay, so let's talk about specialty for a second. What is it exactly, and does it matter at all? I think the best way to summarize it is that your specialty is essentially that itch that few and maybe no one else can scratch in the world when it comes to what you do for a living. So if you're a designer, if you're a copywriter, if you're selling different sorts of items, or maybe you're a connector, what is it about what you do that is special and specific? It's got to be something that you can be known for. And the easiest way to do that is just pick something you love, no matter what it is, whatever you're most passionate about. Just start thinking about it in that sort of point of view. And then it's also important that you think about it in the context of it's something that other people can do, but maybe you can do really well or better. And if you start to think about it in this point of view, it's going to unlock a lot of different cool opportunities for you. The other thing about your specialty is that it may start in a certain way, and as you get feedback from people, it may evolve into something else. So how do you discover the superpower? We all want superpowers. Well, at least I know I do. We're looking here at this wonderful image of Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr. And as you look at this eclectic mix of folks, everyone has their own sort of special superpower. So how do you find that? Well, you're going to experiment, and you're going to want to ask a lot of different people what that is. It might also help you to think about what it is that you love the most, and what you're going to become known for, probably the best audience to talk to is going to be your past clients. You're going to want to know what they really think about your work, what you've done in the past. And it may be different than what you think of when it comes to like what you think is important. And that's really valuable info to get. Hold on to what it is that you like. Also listen to people and hear out like what it is that they know you for. It might even help if you want to go this route to have fun with it. You know, maybe take a personality test, figure out what kind of Disney princess you are. Sometimes I get Jasmine, sometimes I've gotten Belle. This helps you to sort of think of yourself in a different context. Because as a creative person, you're so used to being your own sort of identity, and you are obviously going to have that identity. It's also good to figure out how you're going to market yourself. So it's helpful to kind of separate a little bit of that and figure out like what's the avatar or what's the character, maybe the persona, whatever it is that you find, just pick something and run with it for a while. It might be that as you go along the process, as you're talking to people, it gets redefined or you reinvent it multiple times, but you have to really get it so that it happens as a sort of community experience. And that's something that's also an important distinction. Oftentimes you'll start thinking to yourself, well, I want to be known for this thing, or I want my superpower to be this. This whole process is very collaborative and communal. So there's going to be a feedback loop that you want to encourage and allow yourself for. Okay, now that we understand that we have to have a superpower, maybe you already picked one, you've got one already in mind perhaps. Now let's talk about your origin story. Not everyone's gonna have to know your origin story actually. Maybe people are never gonna even find out your origin story, but it's important that you know what that origin story is, what it's all about, and why it matters. So how exactly does that work? Well, you want your origin story to support your superpower, and it's sort of the origin of where it came from. Is it your family, your background, maybe your passion? Maybe you went on a trip one time as a kid that informed your aesthetic about what it is that you like to do. You want to ground your origin story in something that's real and tangible, because that's how people are going to remember you if you ever do talk about your origin story. And it's also going to be for you, how you make it real and alive each and every time you start to talk to people about what you do, what you love to do for a living. The best framework that I found is really to think about it if in this context of like, if A happened, then B can occur. If maybe like in my case, you spoke Spanish at home, maybe that allows you to speak Spanish all the time, porque español es primer idioma. Maybe that's the way you want to work with it. But that helps you to frame up the value and the importance of your origin story. And then as you're developing your origin story, what I found is it actually helps to figure out what you're uncomfortable in. So growing up, I wanted to fit in. Speaking Spanish is awesome. I love it. I didn't want people to know that I didn't fit in, that I wasn't like them. So it was very uncomfortable for me. As I started to do more and more work, and yes, that actually is my superpower, the ability to speak Spanish and English. I also speak French, which I think is more impressive, but Spanish has helped me out a lot in my career. But it was that part of me that was uncomfortable that initially didn't want me to go or lean in that direction. And I found that that's a really important thing as I'm developing the origin story and my superpower. Okay, so now we're in a good spot, right? We've got our superpower, our origin story. How do we put this into action? You're gonna have to ask yourself, what are you all about? Like, what do you stand for? When people think about you, what is it that you want to be known for? Is it equality, justice, excellence, consistency, speed? All these different things are valuable. You want to pick a couple that really resonate with you. Why does this matter? Well, it's because say that you do interface design and you're very good at it. You're very quick at it. So you might be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm doing interface design because I value speed. I want everyone to have access to a great experience. And really what you're standing for then at that point is equality. Equality of access to great design. If you're a copywriter, maybe equality access to great writing. I think that's what makes this whole thing feel real, and it's what you stand for. That's a super important thing. Okay, so now we've got what we need. We've got this wonderful idea. We've done a lot of internal work. We understand our superpower, origin story. We know what we stand for. This is, I think, the part that a lot of us creatives may have a hard time with. And that's, we have to tell our story, and we have to tell our story well. The idea here is that the story is you. You are essentially your own brand, and you want to be able to let people know what you're known for. You also want people to figure out what it is that you do in such a way that they remember you with the right platform. Figure out what suits your personality. Here I provided a couple of different ideas. If you're a little bit of an entertainer like I am, maybe you like Instagram, specifically Instagram stories. If you like to write, or perhaps you don't want to have such a in-your-face kind of persona, email and Twitter works really well. And if you have the desire and you like to engage with people, I think that Facebook is a great platform for that. Finally, even TikTok is becoming more and more prevalent. Whatever the platform, you have to do one thing. You have to engage regularly. And this is where I need to pause for a second. You might be thinking, well, engage regularly. I don't have time, Diego. I'm busy. I can't do that every day. I never said every day. I just said regularly. So if that's like once a week, once every 2 weeks, even once a month, but hopefully more often than that, the idea is that you want to have consistency with whatever you're talking about, with whatever your story is. You want to talk about your superpower. You want to talk about your origin story. All those things are really important to have on your preferred platform. And you can have more than one platform. Now that you're thinking about telling your story, maybe you're building up a little bit of courage. You want to start thinking about who cares, right? So let me tell you, someone is going to care. You have to find the right audience. You have to tell your story to the right people. That might involve some research, figuring out like, who is it that might be interested in the work that I'm doing? You might be doing some mind mapping and bubble mapping of possible folks that you want to talk to. You want to follow your audience online. So the easiest thing is, say, Instagram. You want to follow the people that you think might be interested in what you're doing. And you want to build a relationship with people, not just through like, sharing emojis like I do and, just liking their posts, but also through creating valuable content for that particular person. You might not always know, but think about what it is that they might like. And you want to think about how the value can originate or come from your superpower. So whatever the content is you're creating, use your superpower as a foundation for a lot of that stuff. Now, I'm going to make it real for myself. I speak Spanish, as I mentioned. I do commercial work, and I'm known for doing commercial work, and it's really helped me out a lot. It's accelerated a lot of opportunities for me. So I know that my audience is going to be Spanish language agencies, multicultural agencies. A lot of them are probably going to be in Miami, and so then I understand where to focus my energy. The finding your audience part is so critical that I need to highlight this concept, and it may not look or feel like the way that you expect. It's not going to be necessarily you Google something and you immediately know. It's going to be this iterative process where you meet people. Now, this is an image that maybe if it were in COVID times, people would be wearing masks and probably not shaking hands. But you're going to be meeting people, whether it's online, on Zoom, or any kind of way that you can, and you're going to try to build a relationship with people. And that's really important to figure out where the audience is. It's going to be a little bit of a moving target, and that's okay. So now let's talk about how does this all work together? So we've talked about a lot of great, wonderful things, but what does that look like for an actual individual? I'll use myself as a case study here. Okay, so I graduated film school. That was fun. I love art. What I wanted to be known for was great visual aesthetic, because I love art, love kind of great colors and bold imagery. Along the way, I started working in editing. My degree is actually in writing, directing, not editing, but I found that there's a lot of opportunity for myself as an editor. And I started working on a Spanish language aspect of a show called Cocaine Wars for National Geographic. And of course, Cocaine Wars, part of it took place in Colombia. So that was really cool. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. It was helpful. That seemed like a really interesting thing. How do I speak Spanish? As Lisa let you know, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. Nací en Irapuato, Guanajuato. Irapuato es un estado en el medio de México. It's like in the middle of the country. And not a lot of people know about it. Not a lot of people go to Irapuato, but maybe it's San Miguel de Allende. But that's important to kind of ground my origin story and my superpower. And my personality, lends itself well to Instagram. So I use Instagram quite a bit. As I started to realize that my superpower was speaking Spanish and using Spanish, it wasn't necessarily my aesthetics, but Spanish, it allowed me then to integrate both of those things together. And that's this idea that you're going to have an iterative process with your community. You're going to engage, you're going to figure things out, you're going to listen. And then once you understand what that is, you're going to find a way to tell your story consistently. That way, no matter whether someone is checking out your email for the first time, your Instagram post, your Facebook post, they're going to know that you have a consistent narrative that you're sharing with people. And if you're doing that, if you do that consistently, if you do that well, if people know what you're known for, they're just going to think of you, and suddenly you're going to start thriving. Miraculously, you're actually going to find maybe more work than you did before. And if you're like me, you might actually have better gross sales in 2020 than 2019, which I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around how that's been possible, but I've been very fortunate. And a lot of it has been because I've really leaned into what I'm known for. What have I done in the past? Well, from National Geographic Discovery, I started working with Google recently, just wrapped up a national campaign. Started working with Verizon Wireless with this agency called The Community. They're a great agency. And then I worked a lot with Crispin Porter Boguski. I've done work with Infinity and Comcast. I was a director for a Spanish language television show called Xfinity Latino, which was great. And the fact that I spoke Spanish allowed me to direct. Now, some of these other projects, like I've worked with American Airlines and Fruit of the Loom, that's not necessarily because of me speaking Spanish, but it does all sort of interconnect and people remember me for that one thing. Whew. Well, finally, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your time. I know we covered a lot of interesting topics. Key idea here is find your superpower, share it with people. And I hope that this was valuable, and keep dreaming those impossible dreams. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you all listening.
Thank you again, Diego. And I hope you guys like it. So we are gonna start with some questions. If you guys have any for Diego, you can click in the Q&A and write them there. I actually have some for you myself.
Sure.
So we were talking about like superpower, and you keep say about the Spanish language. Can you have more than one superpower?
Absolutely. Think about Superman. Superman's got, laser vision. He's got speed. He's got strength. So absolutely. In fact, you should develop and encourage yourself to have more than one superpower. The thing is that you're probably going to get known for one thing. Like, people are going to think about you for that one thing. Meanwhile, you're going to build this arsenal of other things. So like in my case, if I only spoke Spanish, probably wouldn't get me some opportunities. But the fact that that's what part of it is important. And I think that's the distinction, right? Like, what people remember you for and know you for may not be necessarily what you know yourself for. So definitely have more than one superpower.
What would you think are the other superpowers you have?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh man. So I'm very nerdy. So I love technical stuff. I love mechanical sort of thought. And I think that's what makes me a good editor, is that I enjoy the sort of nitty gritty of it. I also love to make people laugh. So when I'm working with someone on a project, I like to figure out what makes them laugh. I like to figure out what makes them tick a little bit. And if I can, just tell them a fun story. And I think for me, that desire to entertain people is important, because when you're working with someone, editing or directing or on set, you're spending a lot of time with people. I probably spend more time with people I work with than my own family. So actually, I know that I do. So that's, I think, an important one that you should develop. And then I love things to be, as you saw in my presentation, to be very bold and colorful. And I think that stems from being from a different country where like the colors are very vibrant. At least I know you're from Italy. And so you know that there's a different color scheme there. And I think that's important as well, as to bring some of that vibrance to the United States.
Yeah, we actually talked about that yesterday. I think you were saying your superpower, it can be like the fact you speak Spanish in this country. I would say, well, I speak Italian. So is that my superpower? I believe that just talking another language is not enough, but it totally can like help. And you just need to, as I mentioned before, you need to switch your mind and figure out how to turn that in a selling point.
Yeah, and I think the big idea here for a lot of creatives is that we don't always often reflect on our own selves as our work. So if you're a great designer or a great writer, you think about products and brands a lot. A lot of what I'm trying to get across here is that you are your own brand. And beyond just personal branding, you want to share that story with people. And that's so important to doing well in our lockdown situation, because you can't network in person anymore. You can't do a lot of the things you used to be able to do. So if you're not doing these things, if you're not identifying what you're known for and sharing that narrative online, how are you going to find work? You probably, like I did initially, I struggled a lot to find work as soon as the whole lockdown happened. But once I saw that it was more about sharing what I'm up to and what I'm doing, that opened things up a little bit. And I think also finally this idea that you're not bragging. So a lot of the creative people I talk to, they're going to be like, oh, but I don't want to brag. Diego, I'm not like you. I'm not outgoing. And it's not about bragging or anything like that. It's about just sharing with people what you're up to, what you're interested in, what you're doing. If you're a designer, just share a design a week or something. If you're a writer, share a short story. It doesn't even have to do with what you do for a living. If you like to write short stories that are creative for yourself, just do that. And I think that's my idea, is just to encourage people to create and push it out. Don't hold all of your babies here. Let them out into the world.
So it's more about like be less shine and just share without like worry too much about it.
Yeah, and you can be shy, right? It's just like, think about what you want people to know about you, and share the little bit of work. I think for me, it's easy. I do acting. So someone will be like, how's everybody doing? And that's not always going to be, probably the majority of people aren't going to be in that boat. So it's thinking about what is it about you that you're okay with sharing and experiment. But yeah, I think it's important that as creative people, you realize that unless you market yourself, you may not get the work. I used to think that the most talented people always get the work. And I like to think that that's still the case. I also think it's those who are better known who also tend to get a lot of the work.
So I have one more question for you, talking about this. So how do you determine origin story if you don't have an interesting background? What things do you try?
That's a great question. Yeah, because not everyone's going to be born in a different country like us, Lisa. And not everyone's going to be coming up with our background. Well, the idea of an origin story in the context of what we're trying to do here is you're just trying to ground your superpower to give it some kind of dimension. For example, if you're a very good designer and perhaps you are very fascinated with, say, like Art Deco, right? Maybe your origin story isn't like, hey, I was born in a different country, but it's more like, I love Art Deco. I really enjoy this particular aspect of it. I enjoy the history of it. And then your origin story is more about your own interests, and that inherently provides it. What I'm really trying to nudge us towards is this idea of intentionality as artists and not being passive. A lot of this stuff that I'm talking about, probably you've already thought about, you know, like Lisa, you probably have already been like, oh yeah, of course I need to do this. And same with Samantha. It's just being like, ooh, how do I add intentionality behind it? How do I make it so that if I do care a lot about this particular design trend, that it feels real to me through my own passions? It could be that you went on a trip, maybe college class. It can be as simple as that.
Okay.
Yeah. So what's your superpower, Lisa? Now I'm curious.
We can talk about that later. I think apart from Italia, I might have a few more, but I want to give some space to the people because we have few questions, and I'm going to get back to you on that. So we have a question from Evan. He said, with COVID lockdown, reaching out to potential clients for me has been purely online. How do you recommend maintaining human connection and conveying your full self online?
That's a great question, Evan. Thank you for asking that question. I think that what I've observed is that obviously you're going to have some level of what we're doing right now, right? So virtual connections are important. And then I think depending on your client and who you're talking to, you can do some level of in-person communication. I was in LA for a month doing a project out there, and most of the time I would try to meet up with people. We weren't able to do it in person, so we had to do it via Zoom. And a lot of the conversation we had on Zoom was in and around what I was up to. And then because I would talk about like my superpower, quote unquote, or my specialty, people would remember that conversation I had with them 3 months ago or however long it was. So a lot of this is creating a narrative for people to remember you, Evan, as easily as possible. So that's beginning to take up a little bit of the place of what it used to be. And, you know, the tactile human connection, that really would have to be like with like social distancing at like a park or something. But I know that I wasn't able to do a lot of that stuff, even when I would be open to that. So for me, it meant a lot of these kind of video chats, and it meant trying to figure out how to make it more personable. And so like, I didn't do this today, but sometimes it would even be like playing a video so the person could watch maybe some of my work, or if I had like a drawing, just bringing it up. So trying to figure out how to break down this issue that we have, which is basically I'm on a two-dimensional plane. And if everything is 2D, it can become very flat. So just thinking about creative ways, one of which is, of course, telling a great story, showing your work and doing videos. I think with that kind of interwoven, you actually start to break down a little bit of the distance, but you're never going to totally break it down unless you're able to meet up in person. Hope that was helpful for Evan.
I hope we answered to you. One more question. How do you professionally ask people you have worked with to provide feedback on what you're known for? And what about if they are scared to tell you something that you might not like?
Well, here's the thing, and I think that's the big part of the whole, that's my logic behind bringing that up. We have to know as artists what people know us for. So if I think of myself in one light, and yet everyone is holding me in a different light, there's going to be a lot of dissonance when I start saying to somebody, hey, this is what it is that I do for a living. And this person's like, well, that's not what I know that person for. And what's more relevant is what they know you for, because they're going to start within their community sharing what they know you for, even if you're over here trying to talk about one thing. So what I'm trying to get you to do, and trying to get everyone, including myself, to do, is to close that gap. And that's uncomfortable, right? Because you want to be known for a certain thing. I want to be known for bold imagery that is inspired by late Renaissance Baroque imagery. Great, cool, that's awesome, Diego. Now, when someone's thinking about you, they're not going to be like, Diego really likes like antiquity. He really is a huge fan of Baroque art. He really likes El Greco. they're not going to be like that, specific, but they are going to remember like, hey, he's got a lot of energy. That person is really good. And when you ask people for a little bit of feedback, you can kind of, go about it in the way that you think is most comfortable. But I always try to make it less about me personally, but more about like the project. So like, hey, what went well about that project is a good question. Or, hey, that worked out really great. What I liked about it was I love how we delivered this. What did you think about it? And I think it also helps you to understand, as an added benefit, what the client's goals were. That's something that has been really powerful for me, is understanding what my totem pole of values are versus my clients. I'm always valuing quality above everything else, followed by maybe time, and then finally budget. Whereas a lot of my clients may be budget, time, and then quality is at the very bottom. And I found that for me to work consistently, I always have to figure out how to be in alignment with what those are. So then if I'm seeing that there's a gap, then that conversation I'm having with them about what it is that I'm up to and how I did or how I performed allows me to have insight into how my value system may not be in alignment with theirs. So that's it. And then the last question I might ask them is, hey, if I was going to ask you to refer me to somebody, what would you say was something that stuck out and that would maybe make it easy for you to recommend me? And they'll tell you right there. And then they'll also let you know if they will not recommend you, which has happened to me in the past before as well. It's very humbling when that happens. But usually out of the times that I've asked for any level of feedback, I would say 99% of the time, 95% of the time, it's been very, very positive. And it helps us to have a lot of conversations around things. So I would highly encourage you to try on those tactics. And hopefully you're going to be able to teach me some things after I've shared these insights with you.
How do you close that gap? And what about if you are known for something you don't want to be known for?
Excellent. Okay, well, the number one question I would have in my mind is, if you're known for something you don't want to be known for, are you making money? If you are, you're in a good spot. Let's just pause for a second and acknowledge that, hey, that's a good thing. It's a good problem to be having. And that's important. I think once you understand that that's your foundation, talking about multiple superpowers, that's your foundation to grow off of. You want to build from there and be very incremental about it. If for you, there's a huge gap, like say, for example, you really want to reinvent yourself in the industry, what I have observed to work well has been creating a sub brand or an entirely different brand around what you do. So like in my world, being that I edit and direct and I do cinematography, that's actually not always the best thing, because people might assume, hey, you're really good at this one thing, you can't also be good at this other thing. And so I've had to develop different websites for different things that I do. I think that that's an important distinction for people. And then circling back to your audience, depending on who your audience is, you might actually find that they are within your audience base, that they're actually different groups of people. And so you can start marketing your services to different groups of people, like, oh, these people know me as an editor, or they know me as a designer who does this thing. This other group of people still in my industry know me as a designer for something else. And I think that's where you have to be in tune with the people that you're selling to.
So we have a question from Javier. I hope I pronounced it. I'm sure that was wrong, but
Hola, Javier, ¿qué onda? ¿Qué onda? ¿Cómo estás?
Hola. He said, hello, Diego. I'm Javier. It's a pleasure to meet you. Your presentation inspired me to start my story and show my superpower. I'm from El Salvador, and like you, my first language is Spanish. I've been living in Colorado for 2 months. What do you advise me to get a job as a graphic designer, illustrator, or visual artist in Colorado?
Primero, Javier, mira, qué onda, qué bueno que estás acá en Colorado. Yo he estado aquí mucho tiempo. Tengo un acento mexicano que puedes escuchar. I would say that if you're looking for a job in the short term, finding a sort of placement in-house is probably the best in this marketplace in Colorado. I think that, for example, if you could work brand side or I guess client side, that would be the best case scenario, because folks are constantly hiring different individuals. Depending on your comfort level with English, you could also think about working with an American company, but if not, there are some Spanish language spots in town that might be a good fit for you. I think also, like, you do have to lean into the fact that you have a certain perspective. El Salvador has such an interesting story with the Civil War and all the different things that I'm sure you've seen and experienced. I think people need to know about that kind of stuff. I think people need to know about our world and how it's very different. The part of Mexico I'm from is not very touristy in the traditional sense. There are a lot of Americans who live there. However, it's not Cancun, it's not Tulum, it's not, you know, Puerto Vallarta. People have to know that narrative, because that narrative is something that you carry with yourself, right? You're always going to be from El Salvador. I'm always going to be from Mexico. So people need to know those narratives. It will influence our work, and it's okay to share those insights about ourselves. And then, yeah, relative to job placement in this market, just to reiterate there, I found that working in-house seems to be the best in Colorado. If you're very, very good, then you can even talk to people at agencies. I'd be happy to connect you to a couple of different people I know. And I think that's the other thing about freelancing in this market, is that you have to get some kind of recommendation. I found it really difficult to cold call a large agency in town. Maybe that's around the world. It could just not be in Denver, but it's hard for me just to do a cold call and then have them say, hey, yeah, that's great, Diego, let me check out your work. More often than not, I have to find, or I should say I'm gifted with the opportunity of finding someone who works there, and then we're able to have that dialogue. So I found this community to be a little, I guess the word would be like tribal in a way, and not necessarily in a negative way, but more like people are very aware of in and out crowd in Denver, Colorado, Boulder, Colorado Springs. So your goal should be to network with people in the market like you are now, and saying, hey, this is what I do, this is my superpower, and then figure out if you can ask that person to recommend you. So that's what happened with me with Crispin Porter Boguski. I'd been working as an editor, and I was like, man, Crispin Porter does huge account work. I'd love to work with them and be on that level. I asked a good friend of mine, also an editor, to introduce me to someone there. They did, and it worked out really well. And I'm very fortunate, but I had to learn to ask. That was my big thing, was being like, I need help. And there's nothing wrong with needing help.
I want to add something on what you just said for Javier, because I actually relate, and I moved to Colorado full time in January, like right before pandemic. And as you was like, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have friends. So it was kind of like starting from zero again after 13 years in New York. So for me, it was like a big challenge. What I did, I start looking for creative group in Colorado, and I joined AIGA, and this is why I'm here today and I'm talking to you guys. But if you were asking me that in January, I was like, I'm never gonna be like in front of a camera and like hosting like Morning Brew that actually we created during pandemic. So for me, it was more about finding like the right group for me, and believe me, there are like many. And join something, join one, join few, then you're gonna find the right one for you, and that's how you connect with people and you can start networking. So if you cannot do in person, at least you can do it on Zoom, online, or on monthly meetings.
Yeah, these professional groups are really helpful, and it does depend on the group, right? I think that you have to put yourself out there, and I like what you're saying, just join as many groups as you think you have the bandwidth for, and then you can decide if they're a good fit or not. I'm on the board of the Colorado Film and Video Association. I have to say, when I first got out of college, that they weren't the best organization to be a part of, because they catered to an older demographic, and I was fresh out of college. So I think that you do want to experiment. I found Ad2 Colorado and Ad Club to be great for me personally, just for a number of reasons, and I've loved every second of that group, and it's given me some great friends and even great projects. So I do think you have to kind of use these groups. And now I'm excited about AIGA. I think I'm going to become a member, Lisa.
Oh, we are hiring. If you want to join us, or either Javier, if you are looking to know more, actually AIGA was born as a graphic design association. Either nowadays expand to multiple like sectors. So if you guys want to know more, we can have a chat later. One last question for you. How is your origin story and superpower different from personal branding?
Ooh, I like that. I like that question, because I think it brings up how we traditionally look at personal branding. I've done a lot of personal branding seminars, and I've always been frustrated by them. The reason is that you're somehow forced to take the entire scope of your life or your work and distill it into one thing. You might be thinking, well, that's exactly what you're doing, Diego. And what I'm saying is a little bit different. I'm just saying that what you're going to be known in the marketplace is what you're going to be known in the marketplace for. Learn what that is, embrace it, even if you're not comfortable with it, embrace it, and build off of that. Traditional personal branding, they try to let you know that like you want to brand everything around what you do, and it's very disconnected from what the marketplace is telling you to do. So what my idea here is with your superpower is that Just like, and I like the superpower construct because think about Spider-Man, right? So nerdy guy, kind of like myself, which is why he's my favorite superhero. He gets bitten by a radioactive spider. He didn't want to be bitten by that radioactive spider. Did he choose that? No, he didn't choose that for himself. But it happened. It's bitten. Ow, it hurts. Also painful. And then he becomes Spider-Man. So a lot of times it's being open to what it is that the world has for us and realizing that that's not what I think of myself is not necessarily how the world sees me. And the more we're in tune with that, the better off we are. So this is very different from personal branding because you're letting yourself be known for it. And then picking one thing. I think traditional personal branding is like everything. I'm saying pick one really simple thing, and then your origin story supports it. So whatever that idea is that you are known for, you have to find a way to support it because maybe people aren't going to ask you, but as time goes on, they're going to be curious about it. They're going to be like, ooh, I wonder how it is that things are working out. So if they're going to be curious about it, you want to give them a specific reason why that's true. So in my case, sí español mi primer idioma. Now, a lot of people are Spanish speakers who forget Spanish. Why didn't I forget Spanish? Well, I'll tell you why. My mom decided not to become very fluent in the language, and she was very insistent on me learning the language and speaking it at home. And I just told you a little bit about myself. So like, as time goes on, you're gonna be like, that Diego guy, his mom didn't speak a lot of Spanish or English. I forget which one, but his mom, right? Like you're gonna remember that kind of stuff. You're gonna remember those little details. That's what the origin story is about, is supporting that. So then if you're thinking about, hey, I need a guy in Colorado who's gonna do a Spanish language piece, you're probably gonna think of me, and you're probably gonna think of someone else in my network. And that's kind of how you become a person who's not just surviving, but you're thriving.
Thank you for your answer. Guys, if you have any last question, feel free to write in the chat. Otherwise, I think we have like many. I want to add one last thing, going back to what you asked me before, I didn't forget. I never thought about superpowers before talking with you, actually. So I saw them more as like my strengths, what I'm good at. During your presentation earlier, you mentioned a keyword for me, which was connector. And apart from the Italian language, I think maybe that can be my superpower. Well, I like to think that. I like connect to people, and I'm good. I'm like, I see one thing, I see another, and then I put people together. And I think that helped me in the past. I do it naturally. Sometimes I meet people, like, I think you should know this person. It's like, why? I don't know. I just thought about it. It's more like a feeling.
Yes.
That's, I think, is my superpower, to answer your question.
It's a terrific superpower to have. Yeah. And I think now that you're aware of it, you can cultivate it, hone it in, tell people about it, figure out an origin story around it, right? Like those are the cool things about it. Yeah, I think that the reason why superpower is important is obviously we live in a pop cultural world where those movies are everywhere. It's also to kind of bring to light that no matter what you are in the industry, you are innately gifted with something that no one else can do. And we spend a lot of our lives trying to figure out how to be like everybody else. I know I have. And then you realize, wait, I'm different, and that's cool. What is it about that makes me different that can make me marketable? Those successful artists, and I'll include designers, copywriters, anyone in the creative field, successful artists who tend to do well are the ones who are very comfortable in that. So yeah, Lisa, you're a connector. Now, yeah, Italian, sure, like you're aware of that. And yet I would assume that a lot of people would support your claim that you're a great connector, right? I know I will support it. And that's kind of what it's about, is just to really figure out how to unlock those things that maybe you don't want to share with people. And that's actually what people are more interested about.
Yeah, definitely not something I'm bragging about. I just do it naturally.
Right, you do it naturally. Yeah, and that's cool. Like, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. I like to make people laugh. It's just fun for me, you know? But yeah.
So I want to thank you again for like today and the events. And I don't know, this was like a learning experience. That's the reason I like to do like Morning Brew, because you always meet like different people, different background. And I believe there is always something small or big to learn from anyone. And your episode today was very inspiring for me personal. And I think I hope for the other attendees. Guys, we are going to send a recap email later so you can watch this episode again. If you have more questions, for Diego, feel free to contact him later. We're gonna send you like his email info and connect with him. And feel free to connect with us again as well. Muchas gracias y que tengan buen día.
Muchísimas gracias, Lisa. Thank you everyone for listening and watching this video.
Bye.
I appreciate it. Bye.